told you there's not many dates that you really have to remember in U.S. history. Of course, you got to know 1776, and you have to know 1619. So today, that's my big focus, is on 1619 and the things that happened during 1619, and you have to know this date for two very specific reasons. So before we have Boris and Donald here, before we have these two separate countries with a prime minister and a president, you have England coming over to colonize the Americas. So Spain had already colonized, France had already colonized, so the English are coming over, and with them they're bringing their customs and their ideologies. So they first start off in a little place called Roanoke. It's not successful. So why do I say Roanoke's not successful? What happens to these people? They disappear or die. We don't know what happens to them. So the British are going to hold off on colonizing for a little while and give it another shot in 1609 when they settle at a little place called Jamestown. And at first it's not working out well here either, right? You have a period called the starving time where people are literally eating each other. So they're not doing the things they need to do to be a successful community. Instead, they are literally running around just eating each other because they're spending all their time looking for gold. So everything they brought over was in terms of looking for gold. They brought over kits to test for gold. Gentlemen farmers aren't doing anything to feed themselves. All they care about is making money, which is the reason they settled there originally. And then, of course, you have the two Johns come in. And the two Johns are going to save the day. John Smith comes over, and he becomes the governor of the Jamestown colony. He gets people to stop eating each other. He gives everybody a job, and Jamestown starts to become a successful colony, especially because the second John, John Rolfe, is going to bring over tobacco. And tobacco is Virginia's real gold. This is where they're going to make their bank, okay? But to farm tobacco, it's very labor intensive. It's a very long process. You need to plant the seeds and cultivate them and sucker them. And the problem is when you look like me, or you look like Angie, or like Tayana, or even Gracie, we don't do well in the sun. You put us out in the sun for too long, and we drop dead. So we need to come up with a solution. How can we stop these cultivators from dropping dead? Because we need to plant the crop. Magical melanin, that's the answer. So the Portuguese had already been taking people from West Africa and had established that triangular trade, okay? So England's going to get in on this, and they're going to bring over black people to the Americas by way of the Jamestown colony. At first, in 1619. So there's about 20 or so Africans that come over and settle in the Jamestown area, but we really don't know what their status is going to be. So originally, when these 20 black people come over, they're going to be indentured servants. And what do you guys know about indentured servants? They're not slaves. What can an indentured servant do? Leave and get out of their contract. So they work for a period of 5 to 7 years, and then they're done with their contract, and they can get land, and they can move on with their lives. The people who have these Africans, though, realize that they're not dropping dead from the sunlight like the white people are, so they're actually outliving their contract. So we have to come up with another system, and that's where the Barbados Slave Code comes into play. So the Barbados Slave Code takes these Africans and makes them property. It says that they can never get out of their contracts, they're slaves forever and ever and ever, and their children are slaves forever and ever and ever. So they really have no representation in the Americas except for that they are property. So no rights, nothing associated with them. 1619, people are brought over as property, but we're back to 1619. Say it.
1619.
All right, so I want you to remember that date for another reason. And the other reason is because the House of Burgesses is going to be established. Okay? The House of Burgesses is the legislative body for the Americas. Remember, England is a tiny little island country. It's way across the Atlantic. So we're enjoying a period of salutatory neglect in the Americas. We're creating our own kind of governments, town halls, fundamental orders of Connecticut. So Britain sends over the House of Burgesses to act as the House of Commons for the Americas back in Parliament, okay, in their bicameral legislature. The problem, though, is are Americans really represented properly with the House of Burgesses? No, so they're not getting that representation. If you remember, Patrick Henry gives his "Give me liberty or give me death" speech in the House of Burgesses in 1775. And what happens the next year? Yeah, the Declaration of Independence, okay? So the idea of representation is going to keep coming up in American society. And when they feel as if they're not being represented, we're going to fight an entire revolution about this and rid ourselves of the British monarchy and create our own government so that we can represent ourselves. Except for not everybody's going to be represented, right? Who's not represented? people are not represented. So just like they weren't represented as people in 1619, that trend is going to continue throughout American history. When a constitution is finally created, they're used to get Southern plantation owners votes, but they themselves have no say in how their lives play out. And this is going to be a trend throughout American history, okay? So slavery itself, the institution's not going to end until 1865, and then civil rights aren't even going to be a thing in America until 1965. And even in modern times, you have issues with police brutality and not including African Americans in the conversation, voter suppression, and it all goes back to when we first brought them over in 1619. Ta-da!